Okay, so I just spent my morning going through every single one of my interactions with AI this past week for my personal clarity engine research. I was looking for patterns, and boy, did I find one. It kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, really. It's this stark realization that I've been using this tool all wrong. And I'm not exaggerating. After I audited every question, every prompt, 90% of them were the wrong type of question. I don't just mean they were poorly phrased. I mean they were aimed at a completely wrong goal from the start. Voltaire said you should judge a person by their questions. And if you look at mine, the judgment is pretty clear. My questions show that I'm looking for shortcuts. I'm not trying to build a new skill, I'm just trying to get the answer key. This feels like a big deal, so I really want to break it down. We'll start with what I'm calling my 90% problem. Then, we'll dissect what a wrong question actually looks like. From there, we'll check out the power of that tiny 10% that were actually good, how I'm trying to shift from shortcuts to systems, why this is so ridiculously hard, and then, my quest to completely flip that ratio. Alright, let's dive into this 90% problem. This goes right back to what I found on day 4 of this whole experiment, where I saw that like 87% of my questions were just me seeking permission or validation. But it turns out it's actually even deeper than that. So when I really broke down that 90%, the picture got even clearer. A full 60% of my questions were just me avoiding the hard work of thinking for myself. And another 30%? Just looking for a pat on the back for an idea I already had. Think about that. 90% of the time, I was basically asking for a handout, not a hand up. Okay, so let's get into what these wrong questions actually are. What do they sound like? And I think more importantly, what do they say about my state of mind when I'm asking them? Yeah, these are my actual questions. It's a little embarrassing to admit. What's the best prompt? Give me a template. What's the fastest way? Write a marketing plan. See the pattern? Every single one is me asking for a finished product. I'm just outsourcing the hard part, the thinking. It's that classic proverb, right? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. My 90% of questions, all me, standing on the shore yelling, "Hey, can I have a fish?" I was just looking for an external fix instead of trying to build the internal skill to solve the problem myself next time. And it turns out there's actually a name for this. In the world of programming, they call it the XY problem. It's when you ask about your attempted solution, which is Y, instead of your actual problem, which is X. Me asking for the best prompt for a marketing plan is a perfect example. The prompt isn't the problem. The real problem is I haven't even figured out my own marketing goals yet. This discovery also maps perfectly to something called Bloom's taxonomy. My 90% of questions are all stuck in the shallow end of the pool, the lower order skills like remembering, understanding, and just applying a template. I wasn't pushing myself into the deep end, into the higher order skills of analyzing, evaluating, and actually creating something new. But it wasn't all bad, because buried in all that data was the other 10%. And looking at that small group of right questions it was incredibly eye-opening. So check this out. Here's one of my right questions. Instead of asking for a finished marketing plan, I asked, what mental model should I use to approach building a marketing plan for a new project? See that shift? It's not about the deliverable anymore. It's about the process of thinking. It's asking for a way to think, and that is what actually builds clarity. And this gets to the core of it all. Like Warren Berger talks about in his work, the quality of our questions really does determine the quality of our thinking. Better questions just force you to think on a deeper level. They're how you build a real skill, not just check a box on a to-do list. And what's wild is that research on learning totally backs us up. Novices, they almost always ask how-to questions. They want tactics. Experts, though, they ask why and when. They're focused on the bigger strategy, on first principles. And my 10% of good questions, they started to look a lot more like the questions an expert would ask. Okay, so I couldn't just sit on this observation. Yesterday, I decided to run an active experiment. I wanted to consciously try to shift my questions away from asking for a shortcut and towards asking for a system. The process itself was pretty simple. First, I had to catch myself typing one of those lazy, wrong questions. Then, I made myself pause, just stop for 10 minutes, and in that time, I had to reformulate the question so it was about the thinking process. The result was amazing. Yeah, the AI's answer was better, but way more important, I learned something about my own thinking that a template could have never, ever taught me. This whole struggle is straight out of Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. My 90% of questions are pure System 1 thinking. Fast, automatic, easy. It just wants the quick fix. But asking the right questions, that forces you to engage System 2. It's slow, it's deliberate, and it's effortful. It really is the mental equivalent of taking the stairs instead of the elevator. And let's be real for a minute. There's a reason this is so hard. There's this powerful internal resistance to asking better questions, even when you know you should. I think it really boils down to three things. First, it's just cognitively easier. It's the brain's default lazy path. Second, it's emotionally safer. Asking, how should I think about this, is basically admitting you're confused. Asking for a template lets you pretend you've got it all figured out. And third, it's what everyone else is doing. The whole internet is built on hacks, templates, and shortcuts. And as Einstein said, you can't solve problems using the same kind of thinking that created them. These wrong questions are a trap. They keep you locked in old patterns, creating this comfortable dependency instead of the uncomfortable but absolutely essential sovereignty of thought that you need to find real clarity. So all of that brings me to right now, to this quest to flip the ratio. And I want to be clear, this is not a problem I've solved. This is a process I am just beginning. This is it. This is the question I'm now making myself ask before I type a single word into a prompt. Am I just asking for a quick meal, or am I really trying to learn the skill that's going to feed me for the rest of my life? It's such a simple filter, but it's incredibly powerful. My goal, plain and simple, is to make that 10% my new 90%. And it's slower. It feels awkward to pause and wrestle with a question, but at the end of it, the thinking is mine. I'm building a capability, not just borrowing one. And that's the entire point of this Personal Clarity Engine project, to build the engine inside me, not just get answers from one on a screen. So, tomorrow is day 7, and the journey continues. I'm going to be putting everything from this first week of research together and publishing my very first newsletter on the patterns I'm starting to see. Thanks for following along with the experiment.